I always tell students, especially early on, that like you've got a lot of bad prints inside of you. And so get them out of the way when you're 20 and you won't make as many when you're 50.
Hello, print friends, and welcome to the 65th episode of Pine Copper Lime, the internet's #1 printmaking podcast. I'm your host, Miranda Metcalf. I release weekly podcasts with people in the print world who are doing something a bit beyond the expected. So please subscribe on your podcast listening app of choice. You can also find Pine Copper Lime on Instagram and Facebook, and you can sign up for our monthly newsletter with print news from around the world, all at pinecopperlime.com. We are 65 episodes into this and almost 2 years on the airwaves, and we could not have done it without our incredible Patreon supporters. So thank you all so very, very much. You know who you are. Also, speaking of our 2-year anniversary, make sure you're following this little podcast on Instagram. That's at pine.copper.lime, because we're going to be doing one heck of a giveaway in the coming weeks to celebrate. Printmaking forever, shun the non-believers. This episode of Pine Copper Lime is brought to you by our sponsor, Speedball Art Products, who've been bringing you a diverse range of high-quality products to your creative practice since 1997. Their newest, exciting initiative is Speedball's Print Posse. Working with contemporary printmaking icons, Speedball has invited each artist to design and name an ink of their choosing. Artists like Sean Starwars, whose vibrant Guided by Green is a playful spark. About designing the ink, Sean said, "I chose the name Guided by Green as a nod to my all-time favorite band, Guided by Voices. I've made hundreds and hundreds of woodcuts. Every single one was made with Guided by Voices blaring loudly in the background. The color green was inspired by my lifelong passion for Mountain Dew, which gives me the energy to carve all those woodcuts." To learn more about Speedball's Print Posse, or to find out where you can pick up a can of your new favorite ink, go to speedballart.com. And speaking of Sean Starwars, he actually happens to be my guest this week. Sean is a well-known and well-loved member of the printmaking community, whose eclectic and prolific printmaking practice has captured the attention of collaborators and admirers for almost 30 years. Sean earned his MFA in printmaking from Louisiana State University, and while he is now a full-time printmaker, he's also been an adjunct professor, a janitor, and a used car salesman. Sean joined me from his studio in Laurel, Mississippi, where he lives with his wife and 5 young kids. We'll talk about finding your love for printmaking when you're not initially maybe that good of a printmaker, the great tradition of trades in the printmaking community, and how sometimes there's a story to the print, but there's always a story behind the print. So, without further ado, sit back, relax, and prepare to be guided by green with Sean Starwars. Hi, Sean. How's it going?
Miranda, it's doing great. It's just been a super day, a lot of fun. Been looking forward to doing this all day, and glad that we finally got to get together and do it.
Yeah, thank you for suffering through the little bit of technical difficulties there at the beginning. I always appreciate it. It's still, talking across the world, even in this day and age, can have some hiccups, but I'm really glad we got to connect.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Beautiful. Well, I know your work from the internet, basically, from seeing your prolific practice, and I know we have mutual friends, and I'm just, really excited to know more about you and how you came to printmaking and all of that. But before we kind of dive into the questions, I would love it if you could introduce yourself a little bit and just let people know who you are, where you are, and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Sean Starwars, and I pretty much only do woodcuts and linoleum, I guess, as well. I've lived in Laurel, Mississippi for the last 15 or 16 years. and part of the Outlaw Printmakers, and every day is printmaking. It's like that and playing with the kids. That's my life.
Yeah.
So, and hopefully a few stories in between.
Yeah. And so where did you grow up? Like, are you a Mississippi kid?
No. We actually moved around a lot when I was a kid. We weren't in the military. My dad just was very vocal, outspoken with his opinions, and that makes you kind of hard to work with sometimes. And so, work 4 or 5 years at one place and then move across the country or whatever. So I've been to a few places, before I grew up, but when I guess I did do my entire high school in Chesapeake, Virginia, which is right down the road from where Dennis McNett grew up, out there in Virginia Beach, and that was really kind of important to me because even though it's about a 20-minute ride from Virginia Beach, it's a really strong skateboard culture on the East Coast. It's really one of the highlights historically has been Mount Trashmore in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And as soon as we moved from Colorado, where we had been living, to Chesapeake, my cousin was the manager of a skateboard team for the surf shop. And so he took us, it was like right at this really important skateboarding contest, like really kind of a historically important thing. I didn't realize it at the time. And so, like, I'm meeting all these pro skateboarders, and I'm like 15 or whatever. I'm meeting all these guys that were staying at Eric's house, and then we go to the contest, and I'm seeing what they're doing. And then as I got deeper and deeper into skateboarding over the next months and years, I realized what an important thing it was that I had been to. And skateboarding really became my life. So when you're a skateboarder, back in the mid 80s, especially, it was just one creative thing that you did. And, if most guys had a guitar. I didn't have a guitar, so I wasn't in a band, so you're playing music or you're writing poetry or you're making art and, writing stories or whatever. And so I got kind of involved in these other creative acts outside of skateboarding. And the one thing that I kind of connected with was drawing, even though I was horrible and stayed horrible forever. But one guy in particular, well, two guys really important. One guy, Neil Blender, was the first professional skateboarder pretty much to make his own skateboard graphics instead of having somebody within the company, some kind of clip art guy just making a skull or, whatever it was. And so it was really cool to see this work that wasn't professional, that wasn't polished. It was very accessible, and, Neil's probably 4 or 5 years older than me. And so it's like, teenagers talking to each other when you're looking at these graphics. And I really responded to that a lot. Somebody else on that same skateboard team, Gordon and Smith, was Chris Miller. He was another one of these early guys to do his own graphics. And I read somewhere that his artwork was lino cuts. And this was back in the 80s. They didn't have the internet. There was no way to look something up and find out what it was, because, I guess research didn't exist back then. So anyway, so I didn't know what linoleum was. I didn't know what a lino cut was, but I really was drawn to that graphic quality with the solid black and white, instead of just like that range of tones from a drawing or a photograph or whatever. And then the work itself was really cool. But it was the quality of the work. It was the texture, just the visual quality of that work that I really connected with without knowing that I was connecting with it. So after a couple years of, eventually being in college and dropping out of one school and getting into another school and, all the things that can happen to a non-diligent student, I found myself on academic suspension. And so while I'm kind of spinning my wheels trying to figure out what to do, I started taking classes at a community college, started drawing, and that was horrible because I was so bad. But I saw that if you took printmaking, you would make lino cuts. And so I instantly reconnected with that word. And when we went in, like the first week of school, we're doing little lino cuts, and it was so much fun. And it was so magical because it was that thing that I couldn't do. I'm so impatient and just kind of incapable about building up a value, and then also like kind of developing a sketch into something that that is going to have its own life in the end. And instead, you make a 10-second horrible little drawing, and then you carve on it all night. And in the end, you have a graphic. And so from the very first one, I was like, this is the best thing in the world. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I don't care what happens. It's all I'm doing. And that was like 30 years ago. And that's pretty much all I've done, you know?
Yeah, yeah. That's so great. Well, and I feel like listening to that story, I just have to say, like fucking hooray for community colleges.
Oh, no kidding.
I did the kind of a similar thing where I just, I like went to one school and then it wasn't for me. And so I, dropped out and, just like, I think that like college is such an insane thing to ask someone who's 17 or 18 years old to do.
Totally.
Because like you don't know anything, and let alone what you want to do for the rest of your life, which you're sort of being asked to decide. And anyway, and then of course, you're like without adult supervision for the first time in your life for a lot of people. And so like that's distracting in and of itself. But yeah, it was the same thing where I tried one school and then I dropped out and I went to community college, and just like being able to experiment and take different classes where you're not paying $800, $900 a class to do it.
Right.
Was incredible. It was totally incredible. So like, shout the heck out to community colleges.
No kidding. I mean, it was just the best. And actually, I didn't know him at the time, because Dennis Burnett's a great friend of mine. I didn't know him at the time, but he was in the same art department at the community college with me. I'd see him kicking around with some of the same people that I knew. I didn't really know him that well back then, but but it's such a tremendous resource, and I know that like I stayed way longer than I had to. I did many more classes before I finally was like, okay, it's time to move to the next phase, whatever that's going to be. It was just such a great environment, and the professor I had was so encouraging. And I always tell this story, but like, I'm like, just curious, what's the difference between a lino cut and a wood cut? Because I tore through all my supply of linoleum every semester, and I was like, are you getting more linoleum? But I was curious about the wood cut, and he's like, well, it's more or less the same. The tools might be a little bit different, and I was like, well, where would I go about getting them? He's like, oh, hang on. So he brings me into his office, and he opens up this chest, and then he opens up this box, and then out of this box, he pulls this bag, and inside this bag is this cup of these wood carving chisels, right? And he looks at me and he says, these belonged to my grandfather. He was an artist. I don't really use wood cut. I don't really do wood cuts. So I'm going to let you use these as long as you want. And yeah, that was almost 30 years ago. So, it really stuck with me, but just how encouraging that whole environment was, and just like you said, the pressure's off of you, and you can kind of figure things out, or become a plumber or something else,
Totally.
you can do whatever you want while you're there. And like, man, I've got a daughter that's getting ready to be a junior in high school, and so she's thinking about what she's going to do. And man, it's so nice to have a plan, and it's so nice to be able to have the resources of the internet and to be able to visit places and all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was just like, I could do this forever. But then I heard, I heard the hard way that you had to get you had to get a master's degree, because right when I graduated, right, because I had this woman that I really wasn't very fond of that taught design, right? She was really bad. Probably she really was, but in my eyes, she definitely was. And, it was like, I'm probably older than she was then, but to me, she was so old, and her work was so feeble. And I was like, I know I could do this, so I walked like, they made us go to the graduation, so like I'm graduating from the community college, and I'm talking to all my professors that are there. And I'm like, so when do you think I could start teaching the design classes? And they just kind of laughed at me, and like, oh, no, you've got to have a master's degree to do that. And I was like, well, what about Pat? And they're like, well, she was before that time.
Oh,
and I was like,
yeah.
I was like, oh, so what do I do next? And like, well, you need to go get a bachelor's degree, and then you go into grad school, and then you can teach. The rumor has it, then you can teach.
Yeah.
So it didn't turn out that way, but they did trick me into going in and advancing my education, I guess to my credit. But
Yeah.
so, you know, but it's so different. It was so different then. You just didn't have any idea what to do, where to go, what your options were. And then I was printmaking has changed me so much over the years. Like I probably could just like walk into a football stadium and give a lecture now and not really be nervous. But before, it's like to talk to two or three adults, or it was just a different thing. And so like I wasn't really good about asking questions about what my options were and like what should I do, where should I maybe consider going, or those kind of things. And I had such a great professor in my bachelor's degree too, but I just really didn't take enough advantage of his wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went, like, this is just how stupid I can be. When I applied for graduate school, my choices, I forget what they were, but the pivotal choice, the one that I went with, was if I go to LSU, I could catch some alligators while I was there. And I knew that I'm a big Mountain Dew collector, and I knew that there were some bottles, from the 60s that were English on one side of the packaging and French on the other side. And so in my mind, the only place that could have come from was like Cajun-speaking Louisiana, right? So that's why I decided to go to LSU. I didn't even remember that there's a whole place called Canada, So anyway, but it was an okay decision in the end.
Yeah.
But it's so easy now. You can just figure out, okay, let me type in the word printmaking, and here's this list of the top 50 colleges. And, I would have never applied to any of the top 50 colleges. I had a pretty low opinion of what I was doing anyway. And then I was kind of shocked a few years later by my friends that applied, and they all applied to the best schools,
Mm-hmm.
Not that they weren't better than me, but I never would have thought, let me apply to this number one school. But then if you don't, there's no way you can get in, And so it worked out really well. And, we'll probably talk about it later, but I always give a lot of advice about just get in there and try it. Just get in there and do it. Don't worry about the rejection. Don't worry about what might happen, because it's almost never personal, And yet, but that's advice that I certainly didn't live by when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And, so you got to reach out there for it and see what happens. And then some amazing things can come your way.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's so significant, because I feel like it's one of those things that when you look back at when we're all just babies, like trying to decide what we want to do with our life, the perspective that you can have where it's like, oh, like, why didn't I apply to the top 50 schools? Why didn't I try for this or that? And it's really, I just applied to like one college, got in, went there, didn't like it, went to community college, applied to one college, like the one that was down the street, and,
right.
Had a perfectly fine academic experience. But, looking back, knowing what I know now, it's like, well, how much would it have cost to apply to a few more different schools and just see what life would have been like?
And it was so hard back when you had to send in real slides,
Mm-hmm.
The slides were expensive, having to make the little labels, and everything's format. Everything has to be a certain way for some people that the people looking at it, they don't live by those formats, but damn sure if you don't try to make sure that you get all the type justified on the little slide sticker. And what a nightmare, and the little foil tape that you used to have to put to block out the slides to like you should that should be an art form,
Totally,
I'm a slidist, But the other thing I did was because again I was such a bad student, I wasn't a great printmaker, but I had a great love for printmaking. So even when I was failing or barely getting through all my other classes in search of my degree, I always was blasting out, mostly linoleum, but I was always blasting out print after print after print after print. And so like I was a good printmaking student, but I was a horrible college student, and it took me a long time to get through. And when I thought I was getting ready to graduate, I started applying. The first time I applied to a lot of schools, and I got rejected from every single one of them. I might have applied to 20 schools. I don't remember, but it was 15, 20, rejected from all of them. And the next year I applied when I really was ready, but I only applied to a few, and LSU was one of them. But and it's been a lot of fun. I've been to every one of those schools that I applied to, as a visiting artist, and it's always fun. It's like, I couldn't get into your program, but I can get your kids excited about printmaking for a week,
Yeah, totally.
But that really, in the end, is most of what I have to offer. I mean, like, I can really light your fire for about a week, but printmaking, there's so much more to learn than there is with relief, with the woodcut. So like after 30 minutes of just tool safety and, reverse image reversal and don't cut your hand, now you know as much as every relief printmaker in all of mankind. In the history of printmaking, you know as much. So, so it's not like all the other more challenging things to learn, So, I guess that might be why.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking about, what you were saying about, just try, right? And I'm wondering if there's a connection between that philosophy and your process, in actually your art making process, in the fact that you're so prolific and you just make and make and make. And there's kind of, that sort of fiddly preciousness that people can have about art doesn't seem to be present in your practice. It just seems to be like you just create, and you might print it on a t-shirt or you might print it on paper, but it's just like, just create. And I'd love if you could just speak to that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing is, early on, everything I was trying to do, no matter how hard I tried to do something right, it seemed like it never connected, every step of the way, including like, registering your blocks on just 2-block lino cut. It's just like, it was always bad. But then it seemed like it didn't matter. Like, I kind of came to terms pretty early on with the idea that once you learn how to do it, anybody can make a well-registered print. There's like systems to do it, and then you're just following a system, But it seemed like when I cared, I didn't get better results than when I didn't care. When I loosened, when I just took the pressure off and was like, I'm just going for it. I'm just going to slap this down. It doesn't really matter. And then and it was a real progression for a long time where, because my drawing ability was so bad, and even in printmaking, I certainly wasn't mastering it, But, it went from, when people would finally say, oh, I like that, because after dozens and dozens and dozens of really bad effort in whatever class, painting, ceramics, printmaking, whatever, then you finally get that pat on the back from your fellow classmates and like, oh, Sean, I really like that. And that, I don't really understand. I mean, I think a lot about different things in my life, and as much as my dad especially spent a lot of time with me growing up, he just wasn't very positive. He wasn't really ever going to slap you on the back and say, damn it, son, you did a great job, And so like, I learned to like really absorb every positive comment that I got, and then it turned to, oh, I like that. Can we make a trade? And that's what's so great about printmaking is, of course, we can make a trade. I'll be back in 3 minutes with another print for you. And so, and then, you're thinking, that's really cool. People want to have what you're doing, and then even better, eventually, when people want to buy something, it means so much because they're saying, I'm going to do the thing that I don't like in life so much that I get paid for doing it. That's called a job, right? Like, they don't say, hey, I'm going to play video games for 8 hours and then get one of your prints. They go, they're working in the coal mine doing their job. They're going to do that for X number of hours so that they can have something that you made. It must really, you've really connected. I mean, like the part where like you make money is great, and it becomes something that you got to wrap your head around and kind of accept. But the part where it's like, no, I'm parting ways with these man hours that I put into this effort
Yeah.
so that I could get a TV, I could buy a pair of shoes, I could buy cereal, or I could buy a print. And that is so touching when people decide that they want to spend money to live with what you've done, because the whole time you're trying to connect with people. That's why you're doing it in the first place, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And it's just very touching. It just means so much. And then after a while, sometimes you're not thinking about that every single time you sell a t-shirt or something, but then you'll meet somebody that, like, I didn't have great phone connection earlier, and I got a little notification about somebody that bought work from me back in Virginia Beach. So that was probably 25 years ago. And I don't even know what they're going to say. Maybe they want a refund. But whatever they're getting ready to say in that email, when I finally check it, it's probably that they like it, and it's probably that they still have it after 20 some years. And that means a hell of a lot. The idea that, like, I hear, yeah, I got your clown print in my bathroom. I walk in there first thing in the morning, I see it, and it just makes me smile. And I'm like, wow, that's so great to hear, because, like, I made that woodcut, and then I made one print, and I either sold it or sent it off or did something, or it's in a flat file somewhere, and I haven't thought about that particular print
Mm-hmm.
in a long time, you know? And to hear that, like, they really resonate with people, and they can put a smile on somebody's face, it's really one of the most rewarding things that you can have in this whole process, you know?
And I think there's something so powerful about that idea of that you can create something and that it has this life beyond you that continues to be a part of someone else's life on a daily basis and continues to affect their life in a positive way. There's not too many things humans can do in the world that have that effect.
Right. No, you're right. I mean, because, like, you're probably not going to remember when I remember if I go through McDonald's, I'm expecting a pretty cruddy interaction.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to be leaving in tears, and it's usually me. But it's always unsavory. It's never pleasant. And then you drive through, and you get the smile, and you get to have a nice day, and it means so much, and it really can change your day. But you're probably not going to remember that one interaction 12 years later.
Right.
Or, hey, I held the door open for that person. You're probably not going to remember, yeah, that's the guy that held the door open for me like 17 years ago.
Totally.
But yeah,
Totally.
But then there's the print, and it's kind of nice, and it's a moment in time, and so much about, the way I think about what I do is it's just getting to make friends and just having these moments, so I can see a print, and sometimes there's a story to the print, but there's always a story behind the print. There's always I remember I went and bought that wood at that particular place, and it was messed up, or I had to substitute out for this, or the car broke down, or with some of these things with my son, the last 4 years, it's like, okay, I remember when we did this, and that was really special. And so, like, there's a lot of baggage tied into every one of those prints, in addition to, like, when you made it, but, because, like, I'll print something up 6 years later. So then I was like, okay, did I do that in 2004? Was that 2009? Or was it yesterday? And then, like, you kind of associate everything that was going around you at that time. So it's just a lot of fun, just being around everybody in printmaking is so much fun, and so, like, it's just like, okay, well, I remember for the first 2 years I would see you at the conference, and I just, but now I know your name, and now we're friends, and we'll be friends for the next 30 years, and, like, and that's such a special part that we really have in printmaking that means a lot to me. It's such a part of what I've done since I've been out of school. And through all of that, I've been out of grad school for 20 years, 21 years, whatever. Every moment of my life is associated with what I was doing in printmaking, and with those friends that I have in printmaking,
Yeah.
And it's just a package deal. It's like, and that's something that I really try to get students to embrace when I make a visit. because again, there's not a lot to talk about with making a woodcut. So I'm giving them other sage advice. And I'm like, be here in the print shop, make friends. These are the people that are going to be with you for the rest of your life. They're going to remember your important occasions in your life. These are going to be your close friends, many of them. And this is where you build your life, is in this print shop, and if you can accept that, and if you can absorb the energy of being in the print shop even when you're not making stuff, I think that you really will develop a lifelong relationship with printmaking, and it really just is so rewarding on so many levels, and it has so little to do with what you make a lot of the time,
Yeah, and that's one of the incredible things about our community is it's just, and it's international. There's so much of a bond between people when they know that they also love printmaking. And it's just the kind of thing where, I know that I can, well, not these days, but at one point in our world, you could get on a plane and you could go to Russia or Thailand, and if you could Google a print shop, walk in the door and say, "Hey, I'm in this business," and it's like, great. Well, this is where we're going to go for drinks tonight, and this is who you have to meet, and it just is such an international community in this way that I always think, like painters don't get that. You can't like meet some random person, in Chiang Mai, Thailand, and be like, "Oh, you paint? I paint." And,
yeah, you're right.
Same effect.
That's what I always say is like, because something that first professor told me at community college was like, as a printmaker, you're going to be an inventor, And I thought that was intimidating because, like, I didn't think of myself as being able to make anything up. But you do pick up things that you see other people aren't doing along the way, But the difference between painters and printmakers, I always, I kind of just stereotype. But, you're alone in your studio as a painter, and you come up with something. You figure something out that you don't think anyone else knows about. And so then you lock the door. And you don't want anybody to know because you're afraid that they're going to do it better than you. But then in printmaking, if you stumble onto something that you don't think other people are doing, you bust your door open, you post it everywhere on social media, you go all over the world trying to show people what you're doing and hope that they do it better than you. And it's just that idea of like sharing, it's such a special part of what we're doing. I will say, because I realized I totally didn't answer the part of your question that you asked. So I'm going to jump in there while I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah.
But about like just kind of like that freedom to make things and not for them to be so special and so precious, especially with woodcut. It's a different thing when you're inking up a plate for 30 minutes, wiping it down and all that stuff. Your time is precious and you could be doing other things. But with printmaking, with woodcut, you ink it up in 10 seconds, you crank it through the press. And so, the pressure's off. You're going to make mistakes along the way. A lot of mistakes in every step of the game. I don't care because what am I doing tomorrow? I'm printing. What was I doing yesterday? I was printing. What did I do for a minute today? I was printing. If I'm still around in 25 years, I expect to be printing or having my kids cranking the press and I'm still making the woodcuts, but like every day, even on the days when you're not actually making something, it's all geared towards what you're going to do next, and so it just takes the preciousness away. It's a piece of paper, and especially if it's cheap paper, even that much more generous with it, but I always tell students, especially early on, that like, you've got a lot of bad prints inside of you. And so get them out of the way when you're 20 and you won't make as many when you're 50, but if you're doing like one every 6 months, well, then those bad ones are going to pop up and you'll still be cranking out a lot of bad prints here and there with the good ones when you're 75. And it's just like, I don't know. It's such a crazy thing that you can be 12 and make a great relief print. I mean, you can make something super cool that just resonates with everybody, or you could be 72 and stumble onto something great, There's really no age limit to it. You know, it's so much fun to work with kids and to see what they come up with. But just that idea that like, hey, you're going to do something tomorrow or next week or whatever. And so it really just takes the pressure off. When I do these workshops, like I'll do those little 3-day workshops or something. It's really kind of critical. They're doing something maybe for the first time, or they're doing something very rarely in between what they do for their job, and so they want it to be good, but in the end, everybody's always happy. I've never done one of these where someone just made something so bad that they aren't smiling ear to ear. And the thing I say is like, this was Friday night, Saturday, Sunday morning, and now you're holding something that didn't exist when you got off work at 5 on Friday.
Yeah.
And you have it for the rest of your life. And think about that next weekend when you're sitting back, especially during football season, watching football all day Saturday, all day Sunday, Monday night, Thursday night, high school Friday, if you got to do that too. And it's like, you can have these things that you love so much, but they don't give you anything tangible in the end.
Yeah.
Like you can watch 4 hours of TV and you might know something or you might know less, but you don't have anything in your hand when you're done. And it's like I was saying before about that story behind each print. It's like I'm holding this piece of paper and I remember, okay, this was in Houston 8 years ago. We went and had a great lunch here. And then the pizza wasn't good that night, which is impossible if you are in Houston because we always go to Pink's and get good pizza. But, but it's like, it's all of those things. It's like, okay, we made that while we were in Los Angeles. And do you remember that trip? And like I try, like, I have 5 kids and I try to make everything I do, unless I'm getting on a plane flying somewhere. If we drive, I try to bring the kids. I try to make the whole experience something that they'll keep with them for the rest of their life that doesn't have a hell of a lot to do with printmaking. It's like, but if you make something, all the better. But like, okay, we go here or we did this and we had that experience and we saw this and all of those things. And so when I see the print, it brings me back to all of that stuff. It's almost like a photograph in that way. And it's something for all the negativity on social media, all the bad things that can happen, something that I really love, which doesn't have a lot to do with printmaking either. But like when Facebook or Instagram says 5 years ago, 3 years ago, and they post the picture, they show you the picture that you did 5 years ago, and I take millions of pictures of everything in the world, but especially of the kids, and it's like, wow, I thought I remembered everything I was doing. And I totally forgot that we went here and we did this, and there's a photograph to prove that we did it. And, oh, yeah, you remember then this thing happened and that thing happened. And it's kind of a nice little freebie that Facebook and Instagram gives you just to remind you of what you've done, I guess, when your memory starts to fade.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about, and, just talking about like that sort of how the prints connect you to things in your past. And I know that for a lot of people, what they'll stumble is, they get into the, I don't know what to make, like, they'd be like, yeah, Sean, I hear you. I should be making, but I don't know what to make. And it seems like from, anyone who's seen your Instagram feed that, that's not really a problem for you. And this is a little tangential, but like just considering like, I think, you seem to draw your inspiration from such a good variety of places that just yesterday I was doing some research before our interview and my husband came in and he said, what are you up to? I was like, oh, I'm on a Wikipedia page about Travis the chimp who ripped off his owner's face. Like, do you want to hear about it? And he's like, I can't think of anything less I would like to hear about.
Oh, wow.
And I was like,
man.
But I'm having a great time, So
yeah.
Because so I think if you could maybe speak to just where you get your thoughts from, and then also any tips for people who can get over that. I don't know what to make. I know I should be making. I know that's the only way to get better, but I'm frozen with the not knowingness.
Yeah, well, when I was making stuff up out of my head when I was in undergrad, when I was making things that were more my own,
Mm.
They even then, I was really trying to like fall into a certain vibe. Like I was looking at the expressionist a lot, and so like I was making
Mm.
this really kind of aggressive thing, and like all these unhappy faces. And I looked at it after a while, and I was like, I am walking around smiling most of the time. Like, why am I making these things that don't have anything to do with me, even though I love the energy? Why
Mm.
shouldn't I do more of the things that I love? And I started to try to just make things that I wanted to see. Even, I mean, at some point, I totally ran out of ideas, so I'm looking at other places. But like, even I don't make that much Star Wars stuff, but there's some things that are really cool in Star Wars that have meant a lot to me over the years. And, back when it was harder to find Star Wars products to buy,
Mm.
in between Return of the Jedi and, the turn of the century when all these new movies came out, it was hard to spend there wasn't a lot of Star Wars that you could buy. And so like I'll just draw R2D2 because I
Yeah.
want to see R2D2, or I'll just
Yeah.
draw a Mountain Dew. Like the Mountain Dew stuff still is more obscure, but it's like, okay, here's some advertising. The real sign would be $2,500, but I can draw it for free. Let me make
Uh-huh.
this woodcut of this thing that I like, and then I can see it when I look on my wall. I'll see this thing that I really like. So even with that, after a point, I've drawn as much Star Wars stuff. I've drawn as many Mountain Dew signs and bottles. I've drawn as many whatever it is. And so I'm just always looking for other things that I like, for
Mm.
other things that I'm interested in. And then I kind of respond to them in one way or the other. And, a long time ago, that was about 20 years ago, we went up to New York. When we lived in Virginia, it was like 7 hours away, and we didn't go often enough. But we would go to New York, but we wouldn't go to the museums because the pizza's better. I want pizza,
Uh,
you know? And my friends are there, and I want to see my friends and eat pizza and buy shoes, you
yeah.
know? And so we come back, and we have some really good friends that they would go to New York all the time too. But they would spend their whole time at the art museums, which is great, but they cost a lot of money.
They do.
And so, and it's like, man, like I could do so much with so little money and have a great time and come back and have it in my heart forever. And so anyway, but they went to New York, and they came back with some art catalogs from some exhibitions that they went to. And they're like, we really think that you would like this one artist, Sean. And it was some lady that did a lot of flipping through old magazines, and then whatever her art was. I don't remember that at all, but I was like, okay, that's what you call research. I get it.
Mm.
I've
Mm-hmm.
been doing research my whole life, and now I sound official. Now I sound academic. Now I'm not
Yeah,
flipping through
yeah.
old Playboys. I'm actually doing research,
Yep.
you know? And so, but through doing just the casual reading, I did something so dumb one time back when my wife and I only had the one car. She was at work, and I went down to some thrift store, and they had all of these magazines from the 40s and 50s, Good Housekeeping, Woman's Day, some Collier's, I don't remember what else, but some great magazines. They're like 5 cents a piece, which was a bargain anytime, even in the 90s.
Right.
And so I bought as many magazines as I could carry in my arms. I mean, like from my belt up to my eyes. I'm carrying these magazines as far as I can, putting them down, stopping, catching my breath, picking
Yep.
them all back up, walking the 2 miles back to my studio. And as soon as I got in there, I'm flipping through these magazines, and I'm just reading. Like, something that ended up making so much impact on the work that I was doing was this little story by Pearl Buck about when she met the Dalai Lama. And this was like 1957, 56, 58, whenever it was. The Dalai Lama back when he was like a 9-year-old boy, right?
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
she's interviewing him, and I had no idea that was how the Dalai Lama was chosen. Like, they consulted the oracle, or they
Right.
looked at the teeth, whatever they did. I don't remember what it was,
Yeah.
but the idea that he was selected from this mystical process. And I applied that to this set of slides that I found at a thrift store about a month later. And it was like the next 5 years worth of my work came from just reading that one magazine and just that idea of how somebody is chosen to be this other thing, you know? And so, you know, when it comes to generating ideas, there's so many places out there, and there's so many different things that you can look at, and there's so much that you can do. And of course, you know, there's a lot going on in the world that you can respond to. So, you know, I'm looking at compositions, or I'm just straight up stealing ideas, you know, from 1961 or from 2003 or whatever it is, you know. But then at some point, I don't even care about that, because like I really should just carve blocks every day for other people. Even I don't care. I just like the carving is my favorite thing to do, you know?
Yeah.
And so there's times I get on I'll get on Instagram and I'm like, all right, I'm in the studio all day. I don't have an idea. Somebody shoot something to me, you know?
Yeah.
And then people are, you know, they're sending me all these great ideas, you know? And John Hancock sent me a great idea when I did that one time. You know, I've been friends with him for a long time, but he was like, do a devil sitting on the toilet, right? And I was like, all right, cool. You know, and so like, you know, 30 seconds later on the internet, you're seeing all these images of like these velvet paintings of the devil just sitting on a toilet.
Amazing.
You know, and it's like this whole thing, you know, that I had no idea even existed. So of course I did mine and, you know, was happy with it and everything. But it's just the ideas for me aren't that important. And something else that really had a great impact one time, I was watching, I haven't really talked about Tom Huck and Bill Fick and how much they meant to me when I was navigating college and all that stuff. But later, you know, I'm watching this video of Bill Fick, and he does his skull drawing, starts out with the pen and ink, and then he's cut it away, and then he inks it up, and he cranks it through the press, and then he pins it in the wall. And the whole video is like, 5 minutes, 7 minutes or whatever. And it was just one more of those great skulls that Bill does, you know? And I was like, man, Bill does a lot of those skulls. It was so just liberating, you know? It's like, I don't even have to think of something else from another magazine or from a TV show. I'm just going to do something, because at the end of the day, I've done something. You know, I'm going to make a print right now, and then tomorrow, hopefully I'll have some better, newer energy or whatever. But it was just like, man, it meant so much to see that video, you know, and it really just freed me. It's like, none of this matters, because like what's going to matter is I'm going to make something. And if I don't make something I like today, maybe tomorrow, maybe on Wednesday, but sometime this week, I'll make something that I like, you know, but I got to keep printing, because what if I don't, you know? It's like there's nothing else. I try to make a lot of time to spend with my kids, to spend with my wife. We do a lot of stuff together. But from day to day, if I'm not doing this, you know, like, because I'm already not 20 or 30 or 40 anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so it was like, you're marching towards getting older, and you're just marching towards like as much as you can do, whatever that is. There's a finite amount. I did something one time at University of Oklahoma where we did 24 prints in 24 hours, like this 24-hour marathon. Every hour I had to make another print, you know, and there's a finite number of strokes, of carves that you can make into a block in an hour. There's whatever that is. I found whatever that was.
Yeah.
If it's, you know, 273 or if it's 16 or whatever it is, at some point that hour's gone and it's never coming back, you know? And so at the end, there's only so much you can do in a day, you know? And like as a parent, the kids are homeschooled, especially right now, you know, with all the pandemic stuff, we've spent even more time together, and we always spend a lot of time together, you know, but it's like 24 hours a day, every day. And it still doesn't seem like enough, you know? I mean, like to think that like my daughter, Sophie, she's got 11th grade and 12th grade, and then she's gone, you know? And it's like, wow, that's 700 days. So like, we better have a good breakfast today, you know,
Right.
We better like get along today, you know, or whatever. And it's just like your life is just going past you, and you're grabbing at every important thing that you can, but it still is going to move past you, you know? And so making prints, it's like, man, I better do something, because this year especially has just gone by in so many weird ways,
Right.
you know, for it to already be near the end of July. And it really feels like we're just getting ready for spring in my head, you
Mm-hmm.
know? It's like, okay, well, but like, no, this year's coming to an end already, And so like, I got a lot more stuff I want to do this year. I have a lot so it's like, I better get in there and do them. And if you make a mistake along the way, there's no pressure because you're coming back, you
Mm.
know? And the other thing I tell people, and it's probably not always true, but it's mostly true for most people, nobody's looking as hard as you think they are
Right.
at what you're doing,
Yeah.
you know? And like, because when you're dealing with students, you hear things like, I wanted to make the viewer struggle. I wanted them to spend all this time with it. I'm like, look, man, you go to see the Mona Lisa and you get 1 second, and then people behind you are pushing you out of the way. You
Yeah.
know, like, people, you in your luckiest dream, someone is looking at your work for 3 seconds.
Right.
You know, and so it's like, it's not that it's not that critical. And then especially the way that so many of us engage work now, just on Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
it's so tiny, and it's such a weird dynamic because, I mean, I think it was yesterday. I think we're on Monday today, right? So yesterday, I was carving this design for a skateboard graphic, and it took me all day. And then you post it, and the next day you're posting something else.
Yeah.
And so, like, maybe somebody will go through there and look at it, or maybe they won't ever again, and maybe they'll see it at an exhibition. And you're supposed to have an exhibition where you're only showing new work, so it's like, it's really only from like the last 18 months or whatever, which I can't do it that way. But, but like, you spend so much of your life doing this, and people only engage it for a second. Even the people that like it,
Mm-hmm.
they don't spend that much time with it. Again, if they buy it and they put it up in their house and it means something to them, but it's such a temporary thing outside of your studio. As soon as you put it out
Yeah.
there in the world, it's like one of those little floating lanterns. You can just like see fade across the sky, and then it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
You're not supposed to do those anymore, I guess. But
Yeah.
but it's like, okay, I barely see it, and now it's gone.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, so that takes the pressure off too. It's like, just make the stuff. You're making it for you. You're making it to motivate yourself, to excite yourself, and then you're hoping to share it with other people, and you're hoping to make that real connection with it, where somebody, I mean, like when I go to SGC or something, and I'll bring like a stack of 200 prints, I always tell people, flip till you get to the bottom. If you don't see anything you like, you can have it, because you're basically, you're just playing the odds. You're going to find something that you like a little bit,
Yeah.
but like, then you have that horrible work, and like, you just have this mental tab that no one has ever bought that print, or no one's ever even said they like it. And then eventually they hit that print, and that's the one that they connect with. And so that also takes the pressure off. I mean, you're going to be doing this and hopefully loving every minute of it. You might be sweating, you might be getting dirty, you might ruin clean clothes, but in the end, this is what you're doing for fun, for enrichment. And so, like, who's going to tell you that you did something wrong? People aren't as cynical that are looking at art as you might be afraid that they are. I mean, I don't find that,
Mm-hmm.
like, I just know, again, when my father and I would go to an art museum and walk around and look at things, there'd be all the stuff that he really liked, but then there's the stuff that he's like, oh yeah, you could have done that when you were in fourth grade,
Right.
or, a kid could do that. You hear that kind of blanket response to things. But like, people aren't as cynical as my father was. Most people, if they're looking at art, that's a treat from that thing that they do, from that job that they have. It's a break. They're at an art opening, or they're at a museum, or they're wherever, and they get a moment to be free and to
Mm-hmm.
look at art and to think about things that may be from a different time or a different perspective. And people aren't looking to put what you're doing down. They're not looking to
Mm-hmm.
find fault. That's what I always tell students, is like, of course there's a lot of mistakes in that work, but you're the only person that knows.
Yeah.
I don't know how you thought a dog was supposed to look when you drew it. You might have drawn it exactly the way that you wanted to. Or you might have thought that you did mix up orange and green. And so whatever colors, like, I don't know that you intended to do blue and purple. What I see is what you've given us. And almost everybody assumes that the artist did what they want to do. And so like you have all the credibility as the maker. And so that's very empowering for a young person, especially, to understand that like nobody can really tell you that you didn't do it right, that you didn't do it the way that you wanted. I mean, of course, there's critiques.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and not everything in art has to be intentional in order for it to be successful. I think is another thing that is good for young artists to hear, is that, oh, maybe you did mix up two of your layers, but the end result could be better or more interesting or more fun than you ever even planned. So yeah, the process of creation should be rewarding in and of itself, and then the outcome doesn't have so much pressure on it. Yeah.
Right, exactly. It's just like, okay, here's this thing. And then the other takeaway for me from watching that video that Bill did was like, I'm going to do my thing again, because like we're always like, I was always hit over the head with like generating new content, with like, you want to have, that's what creativity is in a lot of ways, is making something new, obviously. But like, man, I found this turtle in this comic book, in this coloring book, from 1941, and he's wearing a top hat and he's holding a little suitcase. And I'll be damned if I'm only going to draw him one time in my life. He's so cool. I'm going to do him every chance I can.
Yeah.
And like, I just posted something on my Instagram story the other day. I have this melting ice cream cone that I've been doing for 20 years. And I did this giant one, big painted wood carving that's like, 5 feet high or whatever. I'm like, okay, I did that and it came out great. I did a small one. I was trying to draw the same exact thing, and it looks so horrible that like it doesn't even look like a cheap bootleg. It just looks like somebody that's I won't say. It just looks horrible,
Yeah.
And it's like, so how did I do it so poorly after I've drawn it? I've done that same design 15 times, different size woodcuts, lino cuts, paintings, whatever, and yet I messed it up last year. Like how can you be so bad, and how can you be so inconsistent? And like, who cares? I'm still going to post it because it's what I'm doing. And and that kind of gets me to a different thing, like a different challenge, which is, we haven't really talked about the outlaw printmakers or any of that. And that's something that I've really embraced over the years, being a part of that group and being friends with all those guys. But for me, being in Mississippi for the last 15 years, I always say, when Huck makes a woodcut, it's going straight to a museum. When Dennis makes a woodcut, it's going straight to Vans, or it's going straight into Thrasher or Juxtapose. It's going somewhere, And then here I am in Laurel, Mississippi, and it's such like, it's a weird place in a lot of ways, but it's great. But nobody knows me. Almost nobody knows me as Sean Starwars. They only know me as Sean Stewart, my birth name. So it's a weird thing. And I'm in the middle of nowhere, I mean, there's a lot of places that are the middle of nowhere, but when with the internet, we're all everywhere, I mean, it's amazing. If like, I don't know what I would be doing if the internet hadn't come along and I can, have this phone call and do these things. But it's still so staggering. You're like, wow, somebody in Japan just commissioned this artwork, or just bought this print, or just asked me where they could get this tool or whatever. And it's such a glorious thing that we're a part of, to be able to communicate and to be able to interact all over the world. And it really is just kind of staggering, even though it's been that way for a long time. So like, how am I going to keep up with these other people that are doing such amazing things, that are doing such notorious and noteworthy things? It's like, well, I'm going to make a woodcut every day. I'm going to do one every week, or I'm going to do one every day, or whatever. But then also with those people whose work I love so much and respect so much and have been so impactful on my life, they all have great individual prints that you can say, this is a Tom Hawk, This is a Bill Fick. This sums up everything that's great about him. This is one of Dennis's, or
Yeah.
or Catherine Polk. Like, this sums up everything that she does so masterfully. Okay, everything I do is like, you kind of have to see the last 300 things that I've made and look at them all at once to get a sense of what I do, because from one print to the next, they can be really pretty poor. They could be pretty mediocre. There might be a decent one from time to time, but it's the entirety of what I'm doing is the only thing that I think is the least bit significant. Is like, okay, it's the hundreds of woodcuts and it's the lifetime journey of doing all this stuff, because like I could take any one print I have and it kind of pales in comparison to the other great prints that are out there.
Well, and I love that idea too, that you can, you can look to other artists for inspiration, but you don't have that inspiration doesn't have to equal imitation. It's like they can kind of light a fire under you to say like, okay, I want to be good and I want to be creating things, but that doesn't mean that your process has to be like Tom Huck's process, which is, who knows how many hours on a single woodcut, like an immeasurable amount of hours on a single woodcut. That's then, as you said, like going to go into a collection or anything like that. So I think that's part of the print community, is that we can share that kind of lighting a fire under each other, but it doesn't need to be, apples to apples in the outcome.
Right. No, totally. Yeah. And it's just, I don't know. It's just, I keep falling back to like, what else am I going to do? It's like, it's so much fun. I've got these multicolored lino cut T-shirts that I've got to print up tomorrow. Right. I posted them on Instagram and got a nice favorable reaction and sold a few and everything. But I actually have to go in there and print them. And I should have done it yesterday and I should have done it today. And I'm going to have to go in there and do it tomorrow. Because like the printing part, it can be so magical and so revealing and just such a spontaneous, fun moment of creation. Or it can just be, okay, well, now I have to do this again. And now I have to do this again. And it's just not the part that I love. I always like seeing something the first time. But, it's like it's really just about discipline for me, that I don't always have the greatest discipline to go and do the things that I don't want to do.
Well, it's funny because I was going to say, I think that's something through all these interviews that I've done, I do hear from artists regularly, is that, oh, I love making an image and I love like when it's finished and I see that last finished piece. And then there's always almost like a moment of dread when they realize now they have to edition it, like, oh God, now I got to make 50 of these, whatever it is.
What a nightmare, I mean, and like it's such a weird thing too, because like that word limited, that word edition, and it's like you're at the grocery store and they've got like a new limited edition of banana flavored cornflakes,
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so there's that word again, and like, people, like, I'm kind of not in the day-to-day world where there's people that like to collect prints, that they want the edition. And like, I've fought that for my whole life, where like, I'm going to make one and then I'll get around to doing another one if I have to, but this one print can go wherever. And that's been a compromise, because that's allowed me to get more work done, because instead of editioning one print, I'm making 10 different prints, but then I only have one or two of them. And, the financial part of it, I certainly haven't mastered, I mean, I think people respect an edition print better, and so it's like, that's another one of my lacks of discipline, is like, okay, if I do it this way, it probably would be better, but I know damn well that tomorrow, when we leave here in Baton Rouge and we go back to the studio, I know that I'm going to carve more linoleum before I print.
Yep.
And it's going to be 6 o'clock in the evening, and I'll have done something new and still have to print, and it drives my son Wes crazy because he's going to be the one helping me print tomorrow. You know, we've been talking about it all weekend and still haven't done it. But you know, but it is fun. I mean, it's great. You pull that print, you see it. You know, I don't respond well to the challenge of trying to make one print match up with the other one too well, though.
Definitely. Well, Sean, we're at our hour recording mark, and it was just such a treat to talk to you and to learn more about your work. And I always love hearing different philosophies that artists have, and I think you said some really, really beautiful things that I think are gonna give people a shot in the arm during kind of a bit of a downtime, I think, for people right now. So it was just really beautiful to hear your philosophy and your energy and your love for printmaking, because that's what we're all about.
Yeah.
Before we sign off, where can people find you? Where can they follow your work?
Yeah, well, you know, I have SeanStarwars.com. That's kind of I try to use that more as archives of just like everything I've done, and try to keep that as complete as I can. I'm always behind on it. And then there's, you know, Woodcut Funhouse is the, you know, like the online store, and that's like the name of my shop, you know, down here in Louisiana. So Woodcut Funhouse and SeanStarwars.com. But really, you know, the best thing, it's amazing the way that Instagram, you know, I really don't like Twitter as much, but Twitter and Instagram both, the idea that you can access people that you might not have the ability to get a hold of, you know? You can send a DM to somebody that you might not get a response from on an email, you know?
Yep.
And so I love that, you know, and I do want to just say this one thing, which is for everybody out there, definitely reach out for any opportunity that you might want, and don't be afraid for people to tell you no, because usually when they tell you no, they really just mean not now. You know, if things just aren't right now. It's almost never personal, you know. And so don't be afraid, and hope, you know, and you're in somebody's head, you're on their mind. That's when you get the email saying, hey, we're doing something in 2 months, do you want to be a part of it? You know. And that's what I love about Instagram, you know, and that's what I love really just about all social media, is the idea that you can connect with people, you know, without the real barriers, you know. But so the Sean Starwars Instagram is what I use more than anything. So if you know, but it's a shame to see that work so small, you know. So, you know.
Well, hopefully we'll all be at SGCI next year. And we'll get a chance to connect and see work in person as fun. It's meant to. So,
exactly.
Thank you again, Sean.
Well, thank you so much. It was a blast.
Yeah, this was
awesome.
Great.
Awesome.
I'll be in touch when we're going to release the episode and everything. But I'm really looking forward to sharing our chat.
Cool. Me too.
Cool. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks,
Have
Miranda.
a good evening.
Awesome. All right. Take care now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's our show for this week. Join me again next week when my guest will be Masat, whose self-taught woodcut practice has taken him around the world and amassed him almost 85,000 followers on Instagram. This one will also be a double release, with one version of the chat in Spanish and the other one in English, all in collaboration with our friend Ronaldo Gil-Zambrano. You won't want to miss it. This episode, like all episodes, was written and produced by me, Miranda Metcalf, with editing by Timothy Pauschak and music by Joshua Weber. I'll see you next week.